And our people they were farmers. They wanted to get started. They didn't even know the language well. So anyway, in 1934, in fall, in the Vineland Church, I was 5 years old. There was an announcement that there was this land available. And so the women in the church packed lunches, packed a picnic, and that afternoon, a lot of the cars went to Niagara, and I, as a 5-year-old, of course, my mind had nothing to do with land. The picnic was the big thing for me, and I can very well remember that picnic. It was on the Creek Road, at Hunter Road and Creek Road, where there's a big chicken barn now. That's where we had our picnic. And I recall the one thing, that all the men had a short shovel, and they'd go to these different 10-acre plots, and it was sandy land that was good for tender fruit, and they'd dig into it, and they'd say, "This is mine." And my father went to the place. He got started on an east and west line, dug a hole, said, "This is mine." And he had the $100 to pay down, and we've never looked back. My father started digging a basement in fall of 34 by hand, and he's going to build a 3-room house. And I can remember when the one room was built, the door was in the center room. We had to walk across joists that just had a board across them, and I could see down in the basement. And that's where we first slept, in that one room. This was in the spring of 35. And Peter Wall suggested to our people that this is tender fruit land, you should plant peaches. So our people planted peaches and grew tomatoes and strawberries and onions. My dad was the only one growing these big onions. And
in between the rows?
In between the rows, and that's how we got started. And that's how all of our people got started. And about 5 years later, there was no real proper selling organization to sell this stuff to the big markets. And so Peter Wall realized he had told these people to plant peaches, and now there was a surplus of peaches. So Peter Wall, I guess he had made some money at this, decided to build a canning factory right here. But one thing they didn't have was somebody with a license for steam. They'd heard about my wife's father. He was in Windsor. He worked for a canning factory, and he had the steam license. So they called him about 3 times. He didn't want to come because, remember, they had just come over. They were only here for 10 years. They were just learning the language. And he was happy to have a job like that because he had been a teacher and he had figured out how to get his steam license.
And they'd also come from Russia?
Yes. Anyway, he knew some people on our street from Russia, because they were still, their minds were still in Russia. And the neighbors were John Peters. And so I guess he had made arrangements to spend the first night until he could get established here at Peter's place. And his daughter was 11 years old. And I was a 12-and-a-half-year-old. And I was riding my bike along the street. And I saw my dream girl.
You were 12.
We didn't talk. But she became my dream girl when she was 11. We were married when she just turned 20. And so I'd like to thank Peter Wall for my wife, because we were married for 68 and a half years. so often have to say to God, I have to apologize for being unhappy that she's not still here, because she was with me for a long, long time. We had a wonderful marriage. In fact, when my wife and I started farming, we eventually became the biggest peach cherry and nectarine growers in Canada.
You, with your wife, became the largest peach growing company farm
For
in
a
Canada.
time, yeah,
In Canada.
when I was young. And
Was it just your farm, or did you share that with your father?
no, we farmed together 1 year, and I wanted to be on my own. I was that kind of a guy. And so eventually my wife and I had 17 farms.
How did you acquire 17 farms?
You work at it. And God was good to me. God was real good to me.
Did you just buy them one at a time?
Yeah, by the next one.
And were they all the same crop, or were they a mixed crop?
We had everything, yeah.
Can you talk a little about your wife and how Eleanor helped you as your business partner?
Well, I couldn't have done without it. She'd sometimes in this packing house have 75 people. She was in charge, and the thing is, we have people coming back now that said I worked for her as a kid, and they remember her fondly. I can remember something though. You were talking about our early days on the farms here. East and West line was dust, and the cavalry was stationed in Niagara-on-the-Lake. It was shortly after the war. And I can remember the whole East and West line being dust. And I remember at the Virgil School, there was a couple of chestnut trees, and the cavalry would quite often park under these chestnut trees by the school to, for shade and rest. Anyway, one thing I do remember is that I proposed to my wife under those chestnuts, in a car, of course.
And I presume she accepted?
Yes, I think she took it for granted. We had a wonderful marriage. Don't you think she's nice?